When I first arrived in the United States, I felt like a stranger in a world I didn't understand. My name is Manuel, and I come from a small village. Back home, life was hard, but it was familiar. My family struggled to make ends meet, and I wanted to give them a better life. So I made the decision to move to a country I had only seen in movies. I didn't know much about America, except that it was called the land of opportunity. But there was one big problem. I didn't speak English. I thought I could get by with a few words like hello or thank you, but I quickly learned that wasn't enough. Everything, science, conversations, job applications, was in English. It felt like the world was speaking a language I couldn't decode. When I arrived, I stayed with a friend who had moved here years earlier. His name was Carlos, and he worked as a dishwasher at a restaurant. Carlos spoke English well enough to get by, and I admired him for that. On my first day in the country, he said, Manuel, you need to learn English. Without it, life here will be very hard. I nodded, but I didn't fully understand how important it was until I started looking for a job. I went from store to store asking if they were hiring. I only knew how to say, I need work, and most people didn't understand me. One manager at the construction site looked at me and said, do you speak English? When I shook my head, he said, sorry, we can't hire you. I felt useless. I had left my family, traveled so far, and now I couldn't even get a job. At night, I could lie in my bed and think, what have I done? Was this a mistake? One day, I was sitting in a park, feeling lost and frustrated. A man sitting next to me started a conversation. His name was Mr. Johnson, and he was an older gentleman with kind eyes. He asked me something, but I didn't understand. I just shrugged and said, no English. Mr. Johnson smiled and said, you can learn. He pulled out a small notebook and wrote down some simple words like food, job, and home. He taught me how to say them and what they meant. I repeated the words after him. And for the first time, I felt a small spark of hope. Before he left, Mr. Johnson said, "If you want to improve, go to the library. They have free books and classes for people learning English." The next day, I found the library. It was a big building filled with books and computers. I felt nervous walking in because I didn't know what to do. A librarian noticed me and asked, "Can I help you?" I didn't understand her words, but she pointed to a section with books labeled English as a Second Language. I smiled and nodded. I borrowed a few books and started studying them every night. At first, it was hard. I didn't understand the grammar, and my pronunciation was terrible. But I didn't give up. I also signed up for free English classes at the library. The teacher, Mrs. Clark, was patient and kind. She encouraged me to speak even when I made mistakes. Learning English was like climbing a mountain. Every step was difficult, but each one brought me closer to my goal. I started practicing with Carlos at home. I would say simple sentences like, "I want water," or "I go to work," and he would correct me. He laughed sometimes, but also encouraged me. One day, I went back to the construction site where I had been rejected. This time, I was able to say, "I want a job. I can work hard." The manager looked surprised, but gave me a chance. I started as a laborer, carrying bricks and mixing cement. It was tough work, but I was grateful for the opportunity. At the construction site, most of my coworkers spoke Spanish, but some spoke English. I used every chance I had to practice. When they said, "Pass me the hammer," I repeated the words in my head. Slowly, I started to understand more. As my English improved, so did my confidence. I no longer felt scared to talk to people. I started going to the grocery store and ordering food without help. I even made a few friends who spoke English, and they were patient with me. They corrected my mistakes, but always encouraged me to keep trying. One of my proudest moments was when I helped translate for another Spanish speaking worker at the construction site. The manager needed to explain something, and the worker didn't understand. I stepped in and said, "He wants you to move the materials over there." The manager smiled and said, "Good job, Manuel." After a year, I felt like a different person. I had a stable job and I could communicate well enough to get by. But I didn't stop there. I wanted more. I started reading books in English and watching movies with subtitles. I even joined a local community center where they offered public speaking classes. One day, the community center invited me to share my story with a group of new immigrants. I was nervous, but I agreed. I stood in front of the group and said, "When I came here, I didn't know English. I couldn't find a job, but I decided to learn, and it changed my life." The audience clapped, and some people came up to me afterward to thank me. One woman said, "Your story gives me hope. I want to learn English too." Inspired by that experience, I started volunteering at the community center, teaching basic English to newcomers. I remembered how hard it was for me in the beginning, and I wanted to make it easier for others. I told them, "It's not about being perfect. It's about trying every day." Even small steps can lead to big changes. One of my students, a young man named Javier, reminded me of myself. He was shy and scared, but I saw his determination. I told him, "If I can do it, you can too." A year later, Javier got a job as a cashier, and he thanked me for helping him. Today, I work as a project manager at a construction company. I use English every day, and I even give presentations. But what makes me happiest is seeing how far I've come. I went from being a scared immigrant who couldn't say hello to someone who helps others find their way. Learning English didn't just give me a new language, it gave me a new life. It opened doors I didn't even know existed. I made friends, found a career, and built a future for my family. Most importantly, I discovered that no matter how hard life gets, we are capable of overcoming any challenge. I hope you liked this story. If you could improve your English a little more, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with a friend. Thank you very much for your support. Take care.